The Italian Renaissance was a time of enlightenment. It was a turning point in many areas of research and just life in general. It was a time of individualism where everyone wanted to stand out for themselves and be the best person they could be. It was a time of rationalism where there was logic and proofs and really the beginning of science. And the whole idea of the Renaissance man, where a man is knowledgeable and proficient in many areas, not just one or religion. And all of these things lead up to the emergence of secularism, which is focusing on the human body, on the self, on human nature, and not just on religious authority. The Middle Ages, in contrast, held a strong tendency to focus on only God and look down on any human affairs. But Renaissance authors such as Michelangelo, Machiavelli, Da Vinci, and Boccaccio began to change the view by focusing more on the human form and questioning the church's authority. Through both arts and sciences, humanism began to spread. Scientists such as Da Vinci made strides by focusing on physical experiments of the human body and straying away from philosophy. So logic was the new way of science and really working hands-on and not just focusing on religious explanations. Machiavelli and Boccaccio both created literary works that were for entertainment value rather than focusing on religious themes, which were typical at the time. They weren't anti-religious, but they utilized their forms to kind of question the church's authority, which was never done before then. Both Da Vinci and Botticelli exemplified the human form through their art and began to focus on more than just religious themes in art. It was purchased by not just religious authority, but also by the wealthy citizens of Italian society, such as the Medici family. Although the great artists of the Renaissance were by no means anti-religious, the development of humanism and more realistic views began this movement towards secularism, which is a theme that's definitely still relevant in modern society.
One author of the Renaissance was Giovanni Boccaccio, and he wrote the Decameron. And many of his stories exhibited the ideas of secularism at the time. And one story was the fourth story on the first day. An abbot catches one of his monks with a woman in his cell. And instead of kind of following the rules of the church and exposing what he did to all of the other monks, he decides to take advantage of the situation and brings the woman back to his own cell. And this kind of backfires on him, and he gets caught by the same monk. So it just kind of shows, instead of following the rules of church, he kind of was corrupted and made this own choice, conscious choice, to bring the woman back. And so this kind of made people question whether or not people in the church should be in power.
Both Boccaccio and Machiavelli created great works of literature during the Renaissance, and it was revolutionary because it was made for entertainment, but it also managed to interlace some underlying messages in both authors' works. For Machiavelli, he created a satirical comedy called La Mandragola. It exemplifies humanism and secularism on every level of the story. Secularism, which is defined as any movement in society directed away from otherworldliness to life on earth, at the time of the Renaissance exhibited itself in development of humanism. This play, La Mandragola, represents the everyday lives of common people in Florence, which wasn't something that was often focused on at that time. Public theaters were new, so that in itself, being able to experience non-religious themed plays about the average city folk as opposed to only religious or godly figures. It also begins to question the church's authority in general, not anti-religious, but he presented a character named Friar Timoteo that should be of exalted moral character, someone that the community can look up to because he's a religious authority figure. But instead he's presented as perhaps the most deceptive character in the story, at one point stating, "I'm not sure who deceived whom, but this deception is to my advantage." So he manages to manipulate all characters in the play, really representing the corruption that Machiavelli himself experienced at some point during his involvement in politics. The entire play was a social commentary for the aristocrats of the time period, and it really propelled all of them into the ideas of secularism by having them fully experience the realities of what was going on behind the scenes of religious establishments and the lives of people in their own cities.
During the Renaissance, many famous paintings were commissioned by the wealthy of Italian society, such as the Medici family, who commissioned The Birth of Venus and La Primavera by Botticelli. La Primavera is a spring scene with Venus at the center of it and Cupid above her. It's portraying a small world that seems to be separated from Christian society because of the pagan beliefs it draws on, such as passion and freedom and being free with your sexuality. Also, because of the rape scene, which is very un-Christian-like, shows that the Medici family, as well as Botticelli, were starting to believe separately from the church. They were starting to rediscover Greek and Roman ideals, which shows that the Florentine society as a whole was starting to move away from the church and separate themselves from it, so that they weren't just one religious entity ruled by the Pope. Neither God nor Jesus are present, which also shows the society was starting to separate. And the spring is like a symbol of a new beginning, such as marriage or a new beginning in society. In The Birth of Venus, Venus is completely nude, which is very strange because at this time most art was portrayed with clothed women, which stuck with the Christian ideal of hiding yourself and not having sex. Other artwork stuck to the Christian themes, but Botticelli decided to stray from the pack. He made Venus a very chaste and beautiful woman, and she is supposed to represent the coming spring, another theme of new beginning. Botticelli is portraying Greek themes and mythology, and in doing so he's breaking from the long dominance of art by the church and separating from Jesus, the Virgin Mary, and God.
Leonardo da Vinci was a great mind of the Renaissance that truly focused on the main ideas of humanism, like thinking critically and hard evidence. He highlighted his thoughts on these ideas in a set of rules in his notebooks, and a quote that he says is, "Experience never errs. It is only your judgment that errs in promising itself results as are not caused by your experiments." And he just really focuses on experimentation to receive hard evidence to kind of explain everything that goes on in the world rather than kind of blindly following religious views. And he kind of thinks it's ignorant of people to blindly just follow these religious views, especially with like the newfound corruption in the church. So he kind of needs a reason behind everything that happens, and with that he likes to experiment and focus on mathematics and science rather than like faith, just like other people. And he believes that everybody has the power to do this, but not everybody has the power to think for themselves.
So all of the authors and painters of the Renaissance began to show the human body more and to show non-Christian beliefs because they were starting to separate from what the church thought. For example, Da Vinci was all about science and about discovering the human body for yourself, not relying on what God said. In terms of the Mandragola and the Decameron, what was so unique about them was that they were made for entertainment. They weren't made to get across some sort of religious message about why God is great. And they, at the same time, they managed to mock the church a little bit by showing corruption or showing that the nuns weren't as indestructible as they like to say they were. Also, in Botticelli's paintings, Christian symbols weren't present at all, and it shows that people weren't as driven by Christianity. The artists and the authors were able to get away with this because the people were starting to go out on their own and figure out, hey, this is what my body is made of, this is why the world works, and the science was becoming popular. The writers and painters showed a cultural shift from a society that was dependent on religion for governing to a society that was dependent on itself for governing. The church just became a separate body. This shift eventually led to the modern trend of secularism that we see in today's government.